It's been a couple weeks since Season of Discovery has been out, and I wanted to give a brief overview of how I feel about Lock tanking with Phase 1. The only reason I played Warlock was to tank, and I thought this was a very cool looking form and might be fun to play. It also seemed like half of the community did the same thing. At least 40% of the players were Warlock in the starting zone. However, leveling from 1 to 15 was bad because of the mass amounts of people playing with lag and not being able to tag mobs. And then 10 to 25 was bad because you don't really do huge burst damage to kill a mob fast unless you spec into Affliction with Amplified Curse. Haunt's damage was really strong, and then it kind of just fell off. Still nice for the healing with Master Channeler for leveling to live. But I died every chance I could get, and it was a slug to hit 25. It made me want to play any of the other classes to duke down mobs and hit max level faster. I think it would have been more interesting if your Void Walker was able to tank better, allowing you to pull 3 mobs at a time and then spam Shadow Bolt Volley. This spell is extremely OP in dungeons for DPS. If you're tank and pull 3+ mobs, you do a good amount of AoE damage. Then you can switch back to Chaos Bolt with Incinerate for single target. I have been theorizing that you take Lake of Fire, cast, and cancel just to get the fire amp, but this only will work if you can afford to burn your mana. This would only work on like the first couple bosses on BFD and probably would do high damage on the turtle boss. Otherwise, Lock is kind of bad for DPS and BFD because your talents are limited and you burn mana really fast. I am assuming that this will change in later phases with more talents to balance out everything. In short, leveling sucked and Lock DPS isn't that good in BFD. I also want to note I do play retail and come from a place where I like topping the charts. But back to Lock tanking, how is it? Let's start off with how you get the rune. I want to say that I wish this rune was easier to acquire instead of running around the entire map. I know Paladins had to do something similar, but I don't think it was like this, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just going to assume that this was the most difficult rune out of all the classes to get. You first start your journey by going to 2 towers, one in Darkshore and one in Red Ridge, to loot something at the top. For this, you could probably death run, spawn at the top, and make your minion take aggro while you loot the object, so this wasn't bad at all. Next, you have to run to some dude
in the Barrens.
In doing this, you come across horny horde that live in a ratchet that will kill you for no reason if you want to do the flight path. Like, I'm just trying to get the Warlock rune, chill. If you want a PvP, we have Ashen for that. Once you get the quest from this dude, he wants you to loot something in the Shadowfang Keep dungeon, so you have to go complete that, and then loot some mobs in BFD raid. Or that's how it was, but Blizzard at least changed it to where the elites spawn outside and you kill the acolytes for the drop, maybe form a small group or maybe even solo that. Then you run back to hand in the quest in the Barrens. And that's it, the meta is yours. But not really, because you actually get another quest where you have to farm level 29 to 30 fell creatures in the bottom right of Ashen, so you want to be level 25, otherwise they'll resist everything you throw at them. So thanks Blizzard for not nerfing the level of these mobs, that was a big help. This isn't terrible if you have a group, but sometimes it's hard to find others to group with for my solo people out there. I was able to solo level 29s at 25, but there were tons of 30s which made it hard to do. So for this part, I 2-man to collect the blood. Now don't be like me and think this quest is over and run back to the Barrens. You have to then go to the ritual portal in the area, hand in the quest to the altar, and then kill the things that spawn. People say you have to drain soul on the mobs, but I'm not really sure you have to. As long as you get a tag on the last dude, I think you should get the quest. Now you can go back to the dude in the Barrens, hand in the quest, and boom, you finally have meta, and this probably took you a lot longer than you want to admit. Literally running circles around the map and being in places you do not really want to be in. If they cut this rune to just looting the tower items, I would have been okay with this. It's a cool concept and probably really fun to discover, but only for the first person. I don't want to discover that I also have legs to run across all the Azeroth to get the one thing that I wanted to do most. This whole thing might not sound like a lot, but between running everywhere and finding groups and leveling to begin with, it took a lot of time. So, how am I feeling up to this point? Well, leveling was a turnoff from how slow it was. Warlock DPS sucks right now in BFD, and Warlock tank rune took hours to acquire. But was it worth? Sort of. I mean, like, if this entire journey took a quarter of the amount of time, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. I think Warlock tank is still a cool idea and fun to play. However, I got beat up in my stockades run that I did when I would pull 4 mobs. I lived with my pet tanking, hunter pet tanking, paladin off tanking, with me tanking and getting pumped heals by a mage. This definitely has to do with my gear. You really want more armor, health, and agility to increase dodge chances. And Warlock tank's current state is very squishy if you don't have the right gear, and you get hit hard if you pull a lot. Not to mention, you may gain a lot of armor, but you don't really get magic resistance. So, from my experience, I think it's kind of bad for survivability right now, but still fun to play. It lacks a lot of self-healing other than drain life and health stones, which is a 2-minute cooldown. It does a decent amount of damage for what it is worth. I would have loved maybe more healing options or the ability to use Haunt in tank form, but I know in Classic you aren't really supposed to pull a lot of mobs at one time anyway. This was my build and I like it a lot more for healing on Drain Life, Instant Corruption, more damage, and the only thing I'd probably change is either more health into Stamina and Demonology Tree, or increased mana with Life Tap. If you were able to tank things without Voidwalker, I think the stamina increase from the imp would also be nice, but I know you can also sacrifice the Voidwalker for a shield. This could be a later build for survivability where you increase your health with the Voidwalker, damage is between you and them, you can sack them and instant summon them back, and then you go down the Affliction tree for more healing, mana, corruption, and agony damage. I will say if you don't need the survivability, there's a chance you don't fully go into Demonology. Instead, you go into Affliction with Siphon Life, with Shadow Mastery to increase shadow damage for later builds. But that's all for the future. I want to say Warlock tank will probably get a lot better with more levels and better gear, but it's kind of okay for right now. You have a 1-second stun that can be used out of combat, which should be able to be used in combat. Shadow Bolt is a 6-second cleave, and Mass Taunt, which is a 10-minute cooldown, which is a nice quality of life thing to help hold aggro. I think the playstyle of it is great. I like tagging each mob with Agony and Corruption, Shadow Bolt Cleave, Demonic Race for dodge and crit, Amplify Curse for more single target, and Master Channeler for healing and damage from Drain Life. The one thing that would make tanking easier would be putting your dots on one target, and then when you press Shadow Cleave, it spreads the dots to the other targets, or maybe draining life from every target or something like that. But that's way too advanced, I think, for Classic. But would make it a lot easier to play. Warlock tank does good DPS, just kind of squishy. For Warlock DPS, I do like the play style of adding Chaos Bolt with Incinerate and Haunt. Even though you might not do a lot of DPS and burn mana, it is still better than the Classic playstyle. I think Warlock tank and DPS is in a pretty okay spot on how they feel to play, but they just don't compare to the other classes in its current state. If you guys ran Warlock tank, let me know how you felt about the process or how tanking is. Was it just me feeling like you're squishy, or was I just pulling too much and maybe I just didn't have the right gear? I think they might be a better raid tank boss than dungeon, but let me know about the talents and maybe future things, and if you think it would still be viable at max level. In its current state, I wouldn't recommend playing this, but there is hope it will be a great tank in later levels once you can finally fully go down the tree. Speaking of other classes and SOD as a whole, I really enjoyed this concept. It is really interesting and fun for what it is. I like the early runes where you didn't have to look up how to get them and actually discovering them for yourself. Like the Frozen Murloc one, the Drained Soul one, or the Pendant. I think playing a stronger leveling class with the ideas of new runes would have made this experience more enjoyable for me. BFD was a lot of fun to complete as a reimagined 10-man raid. It also was hard for me to find a group though, it took a couple days for that. Let me know if you played any other classes, as well as your experience with playing SOD. Is there anything you wish they would have did, or are you happy with how everything turned out? Hopefully next couple patches will be more enjoyable now that I do have meta, but we will see. It's been 2 weeks since I last played, and I'm not sure if I'd go back. The idea of new raids seems fun, but not having a group to play with makes it kind of boring, especially while leveling. I do want to make one final note on this in retail. It would be interesting if they brought some of these changes to the retail side of the game. I think Warlock Tank and Mage Healer could be an interesting addition. I also feel like Blizzard is putting a lot of effort into this and into the next expansion, so retail will become stale within the next couple months until War Within comes out a year from now. I may make a video on that about how I currently feel about retail and the player base with dungeons and whatnot, but I'll see how this does first. Anyway, see you next time. Thanks for watching.